Fort Worth was developed as a fort to keep peace along a 200-mile frontier. The Army commissioned Brevet Major Ripley Allen Arnold in 1849 to establish a military post in what he said was a wild and beautiful country inhabited only by Indians, wild or Mustang horses, innumerable quantities of deer, wolves, and wild turkeys. The fort was named after General William Jenkins Worth, who was one of the most popular generals of the Mexican War, who appointed Arnold in charge of two northernmost forts before he died of cholera, and Fort Worth was therefore named in honor of him. Texas joining the Confederacy majorly impacted the development of Fort Worth since it left the town with virtually no business or protection. When Major Kleber Miller von Zandt came to Fort Worth in August of 1865, he said it presented a sad and gloomy picture. I think there were not over 250 people, counting men, women, and children. However, once the war ended, Tarrant County emerged one of the first governments established in the South. It had more pressing matters to attend to than Yankee business. The cattle boom was starting. There were thousands of cattle that needed to be driven up north, and Chisholm Trail was chosen as one of the easiest trails to get from point A to point B, which is why Fort Worth became such a huge cow town, because it fell right on Chisholm Trail. With that came plenty of cowboys with plenty of money in their pockets from the cattle drives coming into Fort Worth and spending all their money, which is how Hell's Half Acre truly developed. Lots of cowboys, all they want to do with their money is gamble, have fun with women, and drink. Hell's Half Acre's development was especially exacerbated by the rail line coming through Fort Worth, which brought even more business. Early on, Tarrant County tried to curtail all the rebel rousers by banning gambling, but the drop in spending in other businesses as a result was too great for them to enforce and continue it. The citizens of Fort Worth didn't necessarily like how their money was being made through gambling, drinking, and prostitution, but they did like how much money they made from it. Things started getting out of hand soon enough. Drunk cowboys would wander into private homes, revelers in saloons would shoot keys off pianos, while the pianist was still trying to play. People would run up and down the streets, shooting up the town, and respectable ladies were insulted on the streets. The town was in desperate need of an imposing figure to help curtail the bad stuff going around the town. They found their answer in Timothy Isaiah Long-Haired Jim Courtright, who they elected Fort Worth Marshal in 1876. Jim Courtright is as close to a Batman figure that you can find in the West. Over 6 foot tall with shoulder-length hair, he was known as one of the fastest gunmen in the West. Some said even the fastest. He wore 2 guns with hilt forward for a single gun right-hand pull and was well known throughout the town. He polled more than twice the votes of his nearest rival, and a Texas Ranger once said of him, "You can't help but like Jim Courtright." Jim Courtright and Batman had a lot in common. Jim Courtright wanted to clean up the city, but the officials wouldn't allow him to because they still wanted to continue making all the money that they had from all of the bandits spending money on alcohol and gambling and prostitution, while at the same time Batman had the same issues because even though he wasn't an official like a marshal or a deputy, the officials in Gotham were also under the paycheck of all the gambling houses and all the mob bosses and wouldn't put an effort forward to clean up the town. Because of this, Courtright and Batman had a lot in common. Even though Courtright was never technically a vigilante, he used his reputation as one of the fastest gunmen in the West and a previous gambler to intimidate and keep the gamblers and money spenders and brawlers under control, even though he didn't have official leeway to do so. Just like Batman as a vigilante used his outside of the law tactics to clean up Gotham and keep that under control. Why does Gotham need a vigilante?
Because crime and corruption is like a cancer that is spread into the police department, into the lawmakers, into the judges. The mob bosses fear me because I cannot be corrupted. I cannot be bribed. All I am is fear. I am the night itself. I am Batman.
In the DC comic universe, Batman presides over Gotham City, which is known as a very dark city that had a lot of problems with gambling, drugs, prostitution, much like Hell's Half Acre did. And the same went with Jim Courtright, that they basically couldn't use the law to curtail everything because they wanted the businesses to continue to succeed. And that is how Gotham and Hell's Half Acre are related to each other, because Gotham couldn't be curtailed by the police because they were ruled by the drug lords and the bosses, same way how Hell's Half Acre was controlled by the gambling houses and everything. So they needed somebody like Batman, who was a vigilante, who could step over the line, and they needed Jim Courtright, who was himself a gambler, that could sometimes use his history and his background as a president to keep everybody in line.
Why are your tactics more effective than the police?
I use fear rather than respect, because through fear comes respect. I am able to go beyond the law because I am able to do things that may be considered cruel or unusual.
Courtright's efforts were unfortunately doomed to fail. He eventually left Fort Worth out of frustration from not being able to do his job and got into some legal trouble of his own. Hell's Half Acre continued to flourish and soon spanned over several acres. It soon became the hideout of some well-known gangs like the Hole in the Wall Gang, which had several wanted fugitives like Butch Cassidy, Sam Bass, and the Sundance Kid. Courtright was the hero Hell's Half Acre deserved, but Reverend J. Frank Norris was the hero Hell's Half Acre needed.